welcome, ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, Get Spool Fishing, Tampa Bay. Myself, Captain Travis Yaeckel, Captain James Beers in the house. Big Rick's up in Georgia, and Jason is spending some time with the kiddos.
Volleyball.
So
we're up in here.
Holding her down, baby. Holding her down. But
that's right. We've been catching the most fish anyways.
Yeah, well, it's it's always
it's easy when they can't defend themselves.
At least we tell ourselves that.
Yeah, right.
Know?
Good deal, man. So, well, we got some fishing tonight. If you just saw, we're going to be talking. We're going to give you a quick report on, bait. Things are starting to change a little bit. You wake up in the morning, it's a little bit cooler. The sun's coming up a little bit later and going down a little bit earlier. So some things are starting to move around. Bait's one of them. So we're going to talk a little bit about our, how we're finding bait, get into a fishing report. The man to my left, your right here, has been tearing up some good redfish. So we're going to get into some serious redfish talk tonight, guys, and kind of prepare you for that October, what's on the horizon.
The Red October.
Red October. Even talk a little etiquette out there, so that way when we find these schools, we can keep those fish as happy as we can. And then we still have a lot of entries left available for the YouTube charter, free fishing charter giveaway.
Where are we at on subscribers?
So we're right about 400. So just in last week from the episode we did, we picked up about 100. You got it. Raphael stopped in the shop today.
Hooked him up.
Yeah, hooked him up. Got him set up with some stuff. Good dude right there.
The old Sardinio.
But yeah, we're up to about 400 now, and with the YouTube contest, which is happening on Tampa Fishing Outfitters YouTube page, which is called Fitted to Fish. Once that followship or whatever reaches 700, one of us are going to be giving away a free fishing charter. So you've still got a chance to get in there, and all you have to do is subscribe to that page, YouTube page. It's Fitted to Fish. We'll see if we can get that shared on our Facebook page again, on the Get Spooled Facebook page. But
we've got some exciting stuff coming up with that.
Yeah,
we're 2 days now.
Yeah, Wednesday. We're gonna be doing some filming on the water. So we should have a lot of good content coming your way. But let's get right into it, man. I know we were busy last week. All of us. Let's get into bait. I know that's what a lot of people tends to be the first thing on their mind is when they go out there in the morning. Are they going to be able to get some bait?
Well, that's normally where we start.
Mm-hmm.
That's normally where we start. Danny, what's up, buddy? Miss you too, man. When you get done drinking rum and travel in the world, you can come in and do a show with us.
Exactly. And bring us some rum.
And bring some rum.
And some good stories.
But, no, so normally, that's generally where our day starts is with bait. I did have an exception last week where we didn't catch bait.
Yep.
And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk some redfish. But, you and I were talking a few minutes before the show about the bait situation, and it's been fairly good across the bay. I know you're normally fishing about 15, 20 miles away from me for the most part, up to the north. I've fished over your way a couple times last week and got bait in that area, and it was pretty good. Like you said, it's a very time sensitive thing. Certain times of the year, certain tides and whatnot, and it had been, an early morning grind to get bait before the sun came up. I know in that area specifically.
Yeah. You learned that the hard way.
The area that I've been fishing, I mean, you can get bait if you know where it's at.
Yeah. You
can get bait any time of the day.
Yep.
In fact, there were several days in the last few weeks where I actually got bait twice. Mm-hmm. We used a lot of the small bait. And unfortunately, first thing in the morning, you catch a lot of those small threadies, and they'll die off.
They're going to die off.
And so there was a few times where I had to get bait twice. But over the last week or so, really starting to see a better mix of bigger stuff mixed in with these smaller baits, which is normal and sort of expected. But, any of the grass flats along the South Shore are going to have, greenbacks on it. I would say don't stray away from the pinfish. Make sure you have a handful of pinfish in the live well. But, utilize those baits. The smaller baits are going to be better for more of your snapper fishing. They'll work for some trout if you're jacks and ladyfish and stuff like that. Yeah. The ability to keep quite a few more in your live well to be able to chum some of those schooling fish works. But, that 3 to 4 inch greenback or, a 3-inch size pinfish is generally about the best ticket for game fishing, this time of year.
Yep.
And can be had just about most places. Now, you'll hear a lot of captains and guides talk about how tough bait and this and that is. We normally operate under a window of daylight to about 8, 9 o'clock. And so that can be tricky sometimes, depending on the tide, depending on the weather situation that morning. But in general, bait has been pretty good across and around the bay.
Yeah.
So
Jeremiah's had says bait's been very small, Christmas tree the net. So I'll tell you,
been.
What's interesting about my region is, yeah, we're getting that, but within that, it's just a byproduct to get the bait. Is it's going to be there. We're getting a lot of. I mean, even you mentioned it. We were right next to each other this week one day catching bait when you had to come up there for that event.
Mm-hmm.
The horse baits, we call them. Those
really
there's
some
big
good
chunks,
ones in there,
and you're gilling them in your net, the small ones with it. So.
Right.
Jeremiah, I don't know what region of the bay you're at. I would say if you're in the upper bay, it's like you said, it's very time dependent, and there's usually a window when that premier bait is going to be best. So I can tell you what I do in that situation is if I make a throw of the net and I come back with a lot of small bait and it's all Christmas tree, I'll usually kind of stop things for 5 or 10 minutes. That means stop chumming, stop throwing the net, give it 5 or 10 minutes, then resume chumming. A lot of times I can work that smaller bait away and kind of start over a little bit. I have seen it where too much of that small bait gets in there and you're only getting maybe half a dozen good baits at a time. So that's just a tip. I don't know where you're fishing at, but that works for me in my neck of the woods. I will say that we're getting more consistently good white baits, and that's really kind of been for the summer. It hasn't been that way a whole lot up in that upper part of the bay. In fact, normally all of us can spread out and pick and choose where we want to go to get bait. And really for this summer, for the most part, we've all kind of been in a congested area.
Sure.
But just running around this weekend with the rain tapering off, other than the last couple of days, the water's cleared up, and I'm starting to see bait in places that we're used to going to catch it. But I can tell you, as somebody who needs to be at the dock with a clean boat and bait by 8 o'clock, we can't roll the dice and make those random calls. But now there's a lot of bait moving around up inside the bay, and I'd say that any flats, north of Gandy, up to Howard, and even north of the Howard, you have a good chance of being able to get out there and get some good bait. But it's there. The one thing we were talking about, we haven't really been checking markers a whole lot yet. I know we're going to do some of that this week, but with the cooler mornings and these days starting to get a little bit shorter, I'm sure if you want to get those one and doners, it's
definitely out there, and typically falling in from that hot summer month, we start to get to the cool off period, and then moving into the winter. The whole bait situation shifts, and this is generally about the time when we'll start moving out to the markers. And one of the reasons why we'll do that is to find a little bit bigger bait.
Right.
Most of the time those bigger baits are going to be holding on the deeper water this time of year. You will have a mixed bag, like you said, just on the flats.
Yep.
And I'm getting the same thing. The hardest part about the marker stuff this time of year and rolling into winter is there's a lot of folks and there's a lot of mornings where you can't get out there and go get that bait in 3-4 footers, especially when we start getting our north blow. When everything starts coming out of the north, everything starts getting churned up out there, and so it's just historically we choose to use the flats as long as you can use them, and then it's kind of like a last-ditch effort. You go out to
don't inflict any unnecessary pain on yourself.
Right, to the markers. But you're right. When it comes down to one and done or being at the dock early and all that kind of stuff, it's definitely an option moving into this time of year for sure. And I think this full moon we're coming off of, I talked about it last week, but this is a very, very transitional moon. Things are starting to happen. I've already seen it. I've seen it with the redfish schools. I've seen it with some snook. I've seen it with bait. So there's a lot that happens in the full moon in September, and everything is kind of right on par. We should be getting some cooler weather moving up to Halloween. Yeah. And from now until Halloween, things generally are pretty good.
Yeah, and you have a lot of options still. That's it'll start cooling off, but you add it for me in the way I fish and the way I treat bay fishing. Meaning snapper, grouper, all that's still on the table.
Absolutely.
One thing you just add that's really good is redfish.
Right.
So it's kind of like you just add another element that's just going to be really good for the next, month and a half or so.
And a reason, it's like a lot of folks ask, and because redfish has gotten so popular. I mean, there was a day when a lot of folks didn't care to go catch redfish. So over the years, it's actually became more popular, obviously as a game fish and a sport fish and things like that, but also to eat, or harvest. But one of the you talk about tarpon fishing, you're talking about tarpon fishing and tarpon season. You talk about snook and snook season. You talk about redfish season.
Yeah.
We are in redfish season.
Yeah.
If there was a season,
this would be it.
This is the season.
Yeah.
Much like the tarpon migrate up the coast, and we sort of intercept them in that transition, point, and catch a lot of them, and sort of that fishery is at its highest during that peak when they're all balled up to spawn. It's the same thing that happens with redfish, and this is the time of year that it happens. So this is the time of year where you find those larger aggregations of fish, sometimes very temperamental, but sometimes just will eat the bottom out of the boat.
Yeah.
And, literally. Yeah. And so I always tell folks that if you want to come catch redfish and you want to have a day where you catch a quantity of redfish, it's generally from September to the middle of November.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you got to do it. And the moons and the tides and everything else play a big part of that, particularly the weather. But now is the time, and it's obvious throughout social media feeds that redfishing's pretty good right now in the bay.
Let's get to this question real quick before we get back on track with redfish. So does the size of the bait fish depend on what species you end up targeting? I'll start there. I mean, right now, the positive thing is you're getting a mix of bait.
Yeah.
So, Corey, to answer the question, I mean, I would say that anywhere along Tampa Bay right now, if you're catching bait in shallow water, you're probably getting a mix. You're getting some small pinfish, some big pinfish, some small white baits, some big white baits. If you fill your well, you've probably got a good
Might
mix
get a few
of everything.
catfish if you're lucky. Those are a good luck, by the way.
Yeah, snapper.
I figured that out the hard way.
Just be careful in the dark messing with those catfish. I've been hit a few too many times lately. But the thing is, so right now, you tend to have in your well the type of bait to go do whatever. But there are times of the year when, yes, the bait can certainly affect what you're going to do. If you have nothing but a large well of large greenies and threadies, snapper fishing probably isn't the ideal thing, or vice versa. If you have a ton of, micro baits, you'd probably rather go snapper fishing with that than go chasing big snook.
Yeah.
So it does a little bit, Corey, but as you get more tuned in and you get a little more keen on, getting your bait, you can probably decide on where you're going to go get that bait based on the fish you want to go get, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, bait. We talk about this coming out of spring into summer, where we all start. Man, did anybody find any smaller bait? Did anybody find any smaller bait?
Yeah.
And so for me, the way the bait versus the fishery works is I sort of follow the trend of the bait, and that's what I'll go target, because chances are that's probably what they're eating.
Yeah.
Right. But like you said, if I had a customer that got on the boat and said, we want to go catch giant snook today, I'm not going and netting up, 400 fry baits to put in my live well. It's just not going to happen. I'm going to go get some bigger pinfish, or maybe I'll go throw the net, get a couple mullet, or if the timing isn't there and you get to the dock and they say, oh, well, our whole day was to catch a giant snook, and I've got a bunch of micro white baits. Well, I'm going to go look for the first ladyfish pod I can find, chum those guys up, get a few other baits. So, it's a lot like, it's you do a lot of trade up and trade down in fishing, and you'll notice that. There's been several days or several times where we've actually caught big pinfish on, let's say in the wintertime, catching using shrimp, or using small baits, and I'll catch a giant pinfish,
trade up.
and it turns into a giant snook unexpectedly. So you're constantly catching baits throughout the day. Sometimes you might not even realize it, but
and Danny brings up a good point there that I head to that advice, because there was periods I touched on it earlier where the majority of this summer for me was spent fishing with smaller bait, and really having to work in the well to find the right bait. But it showed me that a lot of the times when I did acquire some big bait, it wouldn't get touched. So don't be afraid to use that smaller bait in certain scenarios.
If there's two guys that I know that are not afraid to use the tiniest baits in your live well, it's Jason Prieto and Danny Garino.
Yeah.
And I am just totally blown away by their confidence in it. Now, I get it. Listen, I've caught fish on, I've had to use it.
Yeah.
But there's something about those little bitty baits, man, that for me personally, I know it's a mental thing, but I would rather take a live well full of those and upgrade to 3 ladyfish and go cut bait.
Yeah, it's just like my hesitance with pinfish.
Because now I got to use a cork.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be throwing them off. I got to get some smaller hooks. It's sort of like it just destructs my game.
Yeah.
And everybody's got a game.
Everybody, especially with bait.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, elephants eat peanuts. I've caught big fish on small bait. It happens all the time. I'm just saying that for me,
listen,
I'm not 100% comfortable. When I leave, I'm like, all right, how can I upgrade and get a couple pinfish or a couple ladyfish out of this?
Everyone, when they're done, when they put their cast net back in the hatch, has a certain way that they just want their live well to look.
Oh, if you can
pick it. And it really doesn't change throughout the year.
Right.
You want it to look a certain way every day. And
there's only one reason.
Yeah.
There's only one reason why I want small bait. And that's it. Like if I could choose.
Yeah.
If I could choose, there's only one reason, that's for snapper fishing. Outside of that, I could care less to ever have a white bait that big in my live well.
I don't know. There was a day last week. Bait was good. And I'm telling you, I was filling up one of those fish baskets to the brim on the flats of nothing but baits this big.
Right.
And I'm looking at myself, and I'm like, man, I have to stop putting this in, because I knew the fish I'd been on would not respond well to that bait.
To the big baits.
I was going in dark, stained,
sure,
tannic water to catch redfish, and they weren't chasing those down. They just couldn't get
from a chum perspective.
From an anything.
Were you cutting tails and you tried everything?
Cutting tail. They just didn't want the big stuff.
Right.
And it happened to me because a few days earlier in the week I had the mix. I had half and half. And dude, you put a bait out there that big,
get hammered.
You'd get a 30+ inch redfish.
Right.
Put a giant bait on, they just weren't feeling it for that period of time. So I know it firsthand.
I just there's something about it. I don't know. I'll do it. Listen, and I feel totally confident.
You need to turn down Travis.
Oh, am I yelling?
He gets excited about that bait.
Am I yelling?
He starts talking about those big baits.
All right.
And he gets going.
I think I have my mic. I was probably too close. My bad. My better?
Yeah.
I'll tone it down.
But all right. So let's take that bait conversation and get back to redfish. That's where we wanted to go tonight.
Let's go to redfish.
So this time of year, we're talking about the variety of baits we have access to. What are your in terms of live baits, and we'll move to cut bait. What's your favorite thing to arm yourself as you get into redfish fishing at school?
Be honest with you, for the most part, I've got to look at it, and I answer this question 2 different ways. Because if I'm going to go out fishing, I'll generally throw artificials, particularly at redfish schools.
Right.
If I've got clients, I want everything.
Yeah.
I want some live bait. I want some cut bait. And I'll normally have a couple jigs tied on, period. But I would say for the majority of it, pinfish would be my first go-to. Mm-hmm. If I didn't have anything else, like if I had to pick one, I would rather have a live well full of pinfish than small baits or just giant baits or this or that. Yeah. And I know that sounds funny, but I can use them live and I can use them cut, and I feel pretty confident. I know, my bad.
On.
Dang, was it that bad?
Can you talk to him for me, Rick?
I think you got me turned up.
You're good, man.
But anyway, so that's just my opinion. And the reason I say that is because you don't really get a lot of opportunities where you hem up the school and you can chum them up and throw live baits in them and get them firing off on live baits. A lot of times you get a minimal amount of time.
You're just trying to intercept.
You're trying to intercept them, and a lot of times, if you throw a bait out of school, a live bait particularly, sometimes it'll spook the school. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it won't swim anywhere near the school, and it'll swim off to the side. Now you're kind of like, okay, crap, you got to reel it up. A lot of times you'll throw it off, because it's wiggling, or
especially
you got to decide, especially white bait. A lot of times you'll throw it off.
It has about a 3 cast lifespan.
It has about a 3 cast lifespan. And half the time when you throw a live bait out there like that, it's dead most of the time by the time you get it out there. But one of the things that I always talk about is keeping a bait in the strike zone, where the fish are for the most part. And With a cut bait, you can do that where you can throw the bait out there, let it sit, let the fish move towards the bait. Generally, you can crank it back in and throw it back out a couple different times without it coming off, and it's already dead. There's a few little tricks to kind of work a bait in a school. You know, you got to be kind of careful if it's hung up in the grass and all this kind of stuff. There's some little tricks to it. We ended up fishing a big school this I guess it was last Friday. It was a charter tournament or a captain's guided tournament out of the getaway, and so we there was quite a few captains that fished a resident school over in that area, and the school kind of popped up and started moving by a bunch of boats that were already set up, and then next thing you know, me included, we kind of were trying to bounce around the school to try to catch fish. It was sort of like that tournament scene.
Musical chairs.
Weren't really trying to
rodeo.
It wasn't really the best way to stop the fish, but we ended up getting them hemmed up, and once they got hemmed up and sort of pinned in and got comfortable, we started catching them left and right. But the folks that were successful catching them, I believe, the best of my knowledge, was mostly on cut bait. Getting a bait in front of that school or close to the school and letting them sort of come to the bait.
Yeah.
And a little technique is to kind of just pop it up. Don't reel it in, but just kind of pop it up.
Help it get noticed.
Help it get noticed. And a lot of times you'll get bit in a big redfish school. So that's why I would pick pinfish, because I can use them
with you
dually.
And I think the reason what you talked about there is I asked you specifically schools.
Right.
And you answered it perfectly.
Right. Because
that wouldn't always be my answer to redfish up against the trees.
Not always. I still would be okay.
But in a school, one thing you said that you have to understand, and I'm sure our audience can appreciate that, is we're not going to generally be able to just chum these fish up. They're not going to put themselves in a position long enough, or are you going to be able to have your boat in position long enough to be able to start throwing bass at chum? Can you get it once in a while? Sure. But the odds are they're going to plow through that bait and be on to the next thing, and then you're going to be chasing fish down versus trying to get in front of them and just present a bait to them. Danny even touched on it right there. He said a pinfish with a cut tail. You can. One thing about a pinfish is you can cast it. You know you're going to be able to cast it. You know it's going to be hardy. You know if you make a bad cast, you can get the bait back to you quick and know you still got a good bait to get out there. So I'm with you when it comes to a school of fish.
I like using a little bit. I like using a little bit bigger hook on some of these bigger redfish that we've got. A lot of times the client will want to set the hook.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. No
and
doubt.
with a bigger wide gap circle,
you feel that.
With a bigger wide gap circle hook, particularly with a cut bait, you can get a little bit better hook set sometimes on those fish by not having to use one of those little smaller, 1 or 2 aught circle hooks for a live bait that you might be driven to use, or that you just came from snook fishing or whatever. So, most of the time when I'm fishing for redfish, I'm using like a 4 to 5 aught circle hook.
I definitely like. You use mustad hooks a lot, right?
I use a lot of the mustad.
I use them on the mustad too. Their sizing seems to be a little bit bigger. So like when I'm using like an Owner, Mutu, or a Gamakatsu, 3/0, 4/0 tends to be the number I jump up to. But yeah, when it comes to a mustad, you're a 5/0. Some people out there might be thinking that's like tarpon size.
Right.
Probably not with a mustad. It just has a smaller feel to it. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to get out of the fish. When you get them into the boat, you don't have this small hook, tied up in them and everything.
And
so
generally, a fish in that scenario, in that school scenario, is they're pretty aggressive, and they'll jump on a bait and they'll suck that sucker down quick.
If they're gonna eat, a lot of times they'll eat. I mean, we had a situation the other day, like I was telling you, where we had 3. There's actually ended up being like 3 or 4 of us. Fish came down the shoreline. A couple boats got in position. They came by us the first time, and I was in the tower, had 4 clients on the boat, so I had them all set up with baits. And it's always tough with clients. So you can't really explain the way this is all going to happen. And I'm the kind of guide where I really want my customers to cast out, hook the fish, catch the fish, and there's always like a limbo there when you get into a school.
Yeah.
And so the way I'll try to set it up for the most part is let them have a rod, get out in front of the fish, and I'll normally get in the tower and try to get one buttoned up as well. And in that situation, I had a cut bait out. I could see the fish, got a bait in front of the fish. As soon as they came in front of my bait, I got hooked up, and I bowed down on the fish. And as soon as I went to pull on the fish, another fish broke my line.
Yeah. So
I was done. So I reeled in, and I'm yelling down at the client saying, cast out in front of us. Of course, Friday we had like a 20-knot wind.
Yeah.
So it was just it's a challenging thing sometimes, and I can only imagine how much more challenging than I've done it, but with live bait. Where 3 or 4 people are trying to cast, and 2 of them throw off.
Baits
you know,
are
and
swimming,
so
and then you got to get another bait.
you
or
can
ask
cast
them
them
to
a
get
lot further
Mhm.
to get out in front of that school, and they tend to stay on the hook a little bit better.
Circling back, so we and our intention was to talk about it anyways, but we got the question from Judy, favorite artificial. I think you and I are going to be pretty darn close, and I think if we had Rick and Jason here too, and anybody who fishes any type of tournament trail for redfish, probably going to be in that same boat. So kick it off, artificial.
I mean, do I really have to say mine?
Start general.
General would be a soft plastic.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part. For reasons of being able to articulate the bait through some of the shallow areas, you can rig them several different ways. But I would say between, a 3-inch paddle tail soft plastic and something like a 4 to 5 inch jerk bait are going to be across the board. Any redfish angler you talk to, especially that throws artificial, is going to be in that platform. Yeah. With the exception of like a topwater spoon, Mirrodine, something like that would be your second option. But for me personally, most of the artificial that I've ever done, with the exception of topwater plugs, bass fishing included, has all been soft plastics. Yep. And once you get the feel for that, and you really want to get into that, fishing. Right. There's so many ways you can work. It's
a versatile bait.
There's so many ways you can work that lure. People don't realize you can work it deep, you can work it shallow, you can work it fast, you can work it slow. There's a lot you can do with that one lure.
Results are fun.
That can change the way that you negotiate the terrain that you're in. So for me, it would be a soft plastic. I would choose the DOA Cal jig or the DOA Cal lure.
You don't say.
And a number 313
gold glitter.
Gold glitter. Yeah. That'd be my choice on anywhere from an 1/8 ounce to sometimes even a 3/8 ounce jig head. Yep. Now, one thing I want to throw out there is if you're fishing from a tower, and this happened to me, I always have a jig tied on. And I think a couple of the guys that were behind me that were following the school kind of looked at me probably like I was stupid. But as soon as I broke off, I reached around and grabbed the jig. The school was moving. Yeah. So I had I did 3 Hail Mary shots at the school of fish, and a lot of times you'll catch a fish. Yeah. Especially if one turns on it, another one sees it, it's game on.
Yeah, then they compete.
Right, and so I always have a jig, but don't be afraid to fire a jig into these fish either, especially if they're eating. If they're eating, it's game on. But
yeah, bait starts to get less. It starts to matter less at that
point.
Well,
you get so zoned in on it, and the way I look at it is the guys that were throwing cut bait at the schools, they had one bait and maybe 1 to 2 opportunities. I probably had 6.
Yeah, you could make a cast over.
I had cut baits out there, but for 2 passes on the school, I threw a jig in them, and part of the reason was I was throwing over the customers. I wanted something to get further out, but the note I wanted to make was I was using a 3/8 ounce jig head for several reasons. You can't really work a 1/4 or an 1/8 ounce jig head from standing on top of a tower.
No,
it just doesn't work, especially in any kind of wind. So don't be afraid to use that heavier jig if you're fishing from a platform or if you're fishing from a tower.
From a higher vantage
you'll be able to work that lure a little bit better.
I'm with you on the soft plastic. That's my go-to bait, and I won't. You covered all the reasons. I won't do that. I'm more of a root beer and a black and gold personally, but what's interesting, and one of my observations from in the limited tournament fishing I've done is that while our live bait is very region dependent, our artificial choice for tournament fishing generally isn't. You could pretty much go to any redfish tournament happening anywhere from Texas to South Florida to South Carolina, and odds are most of those boats are going to have jig heads with paddle tails and a spoon.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it,
colors might vary.
The entire coast, or let's just put it this way, any area that a redfish inhabits,
that's right, Danny.
Their diet is going to be somewhat consistent. They have a crustacean, shrimp, crab type diet, or they have a bait fish diet. And I think that's the ticket with that soft plastic. You're not really mimicking anything in particular. You're mimicking movement, size, and shades. Yeah. Silhouettes. Yeah. That's all you're really doing. The further you move out,
and you can even taper that bait action and how you present it, how you work it, to mimic what you think they might be focused on.
There's a lot of times. There's a lot of times, and that's part of my. People will ask, well, why do you do all these redfish tournaments, or why would you even get into it if there's no money and all this and blah blah blah. And for me, that's like my relief. Like that's my, my re-energized moment to go back and want to guide. Not that I don't want to guide, but it's just sort of it's that break between
That's what you like to do on the
it's a
water.
break between taking people fishing and going fishing.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things to do is go to new areas and learn them. And a lot of times what we do, especially if we get into a new area, is we look for what food source do they have. That's what we need to try to match. And then look at their feeding patterns. If they're busting on the surface, well then we probably need more surface baits. If they're on the bottom, then we're going to need more bottom baits. You kind of start putting that game together. And more often than not, it turns into that soft plastic where I can use that bait to do just about anything, whether I change the color, the speed, or the weight, the retrieve, whatever that case may be. I can match whatever that area is that redfish are in. You can sort of present a bait to them.
Yep.
The wild card to that is Louisiana. I honestly feel like the wild card in Louisiana is A, finding fish, and B, getting the fish to see your bait or feel your bait or hear your bait. If you can't present it
to notice it,
if you can't present it to them, because there's a lot of times, man, where like we'll go to a chartreuse, and I never hardly ever use a chartreuse in Florida. I will sometimes, but like just a bright green, color. And a lot of times we'll use it in Louisiana because of the dirty water, and I feel like it's just because they can see it. And it's made a significant difference at times. White's another oddball to that. What do you got? We got us a question?
Vance, a bit off topic. Looking for quality soft plastic shiner for this winter snook fishing in the river. I'm going to tell you, one thing. You're probably going to, for that type of fishing, for me, I'd probably say go to a little bit bigger profile soft plastic. Something in the 4 to 5 inch range of a soft plastic, whether it's rigged on a jig head or not. But I'll say for color, I'm a fan of the warmer colors in the winter, right? And if you're talking about a river, and if that's the Vance I know, you're probably fishing down the street from my house in the Califia somewhere.
No fish in there.
I haven't talked to him in a long time. But,
listen, Vance, if that's where you're at an undisclosed location, all those fish have been removed.
But I can tell you this right now, anything with gold and dark colors. So I would say starting on the lighter spectrum of where Travis likes that gold glitter. So we're talking about an all gold bait, all the way up to a root beer with maybe some gold fleck, and then into that into that black back with that gold belly. I think that gives a good shiner imitation in the winter. I tell
you who, if you want to figure out some of that and like get it dialed in, talk to somebody who fishes the Everglades.
Yep.
And I've fished down there several times.
Very similar.
I've been up the Lost Man's River, and camped out there and done the whole deal a couple different times. And I can tell you, you're on point. And it's your darker colors. Oddly enough, right? You'd think, okay, I'm in this dark stained water. I'm going to need something that's bright or whatever. But a lot of times, there was a bait. I'm trying to think. I think it was called a Catch 20. I think it was called a Catch 20 from Mirror Lure that was a hot bait down there. And they had a color that was brown and gold on the top and an orange belly. And all it really did once we got down there and I kind of figured it out, all it was matching those cichlids and stuff that's in the area.
Yeah.
So in our river and the Alafai and the Little Manatee, we don't really have any of those exotics, right? So when we got back up here as kids, kind of me and my buddy Sean would practice in a lot of the rivers, and we would match some of the stuff we learned down in the Everglades. But as soon as we removed the orange, we were on point. And so I kind of wanted to throw that at you because. In the river, in the Alafai, Little Manatee, Palm, Hillsborough River, some of the brighter silvers, like the silver, just a plain silver. I don't know what the number is from like a Zara Spook or something, but the mirror, those types of colors worked really well in the rivers because we have a lot of spawning mullet that get in the rivers, especially in the wintertime. And so we've got a lot of shad, which are silver, and we've got a lot of mullet, which are, once they get in the clearer parts of the river, they're actually like a real bright silver and white, and they get up on the surface. And so we found that tarpon and the bigger snook, we caught a lot on some of the, I wouldn't call them bright colors, but the natural colors that you see bait in the river, which was the white and the silvers.
Oh yeah.
So
Danny brought up another good point. I assume he's talking back to Vance's. The play spoon works because you can change the speed and it flashes well. You retrieve it fast or let it drop. That was the next thing I was going to mention. Is growing up with you, I know I have a kind of idea where he's going to be targeting them, and sometimes a swim bait isn't the ideal bait because you can't keep it in the strike zone long enough. Usually you're having to make a tough cast, get in a tight window.
a small area.
So think about some plugs like he's mentioning, like either a slow sinking plug or a suspending plug in the same color pattern, but that you can, give a lot of flash, but not have to get it through the zone so quick. Sometimes there's a twitch, let it dart, let it chill, let it dart, let it chill. You might get an extra 4 or 5 seconds of being in the strike zone. So just a backup there.
If you're a what I would like to call more of like a hardcore bait guy, into your artificial game, take a look at Live Target lures.
Yeah. They actually have the shad.
That's what I was gonna say. They've got some really, really neat stuff, and if you start to get familiar with the area that you're fishing, you could definitely pick out some baits in there that will probably fire some fish up.
Yeah.
You're gonna spend a little pretty penny for it, and if
get in here,
if I know the area that I think you're fishing the river, you're gonna lose some plugs.
Oh yeah.
So.
But it's gonna be exciting.
It's gonna be exciting. But definitely make sure that you're in an open spot, or you kind of know what. You don't want to lose a $30 lure on a $10 snook.
Yeah, get in here and get up to Tampa Fishing Outfitters, Vance. And probably won't see you, but it'd be good to know you came by, and hope everything's going well. Michael, yep, I'll see you Thursday. You and Pete. Haven't fished with Pete in a long time.
Houdini. That's a Z-Man color.
Houdini started with Z-Man, but now Houdini's offered in
right.
Slayer. But I think Z-Man started that. I like the pinfish color from Z-Man too, with that little bit of blue.
I tell you a bait that I really grew to like last year, and in fact, you know about it because I called you and I was like, dude, pull them all off the shelf. Just go ahead and take my credit card number. I'll take all of those.
Yep.
And that was the Live Target pinfish.
Yep.
And
surprise, you can cast that sucker a mile.
Surprise. Yeah. But do yourself a favor if you're into trying some of these more advanced baits, is what I call, because you have to make an investment in this bait,
Yeah.
And they're not inexpensive, but I tell you the pinfish from Live Target, they make 2 different sizes. Remind me of the sizes. They get the 3/4,
3 and a 4, and I think they make a 4.5.
Okay, so in my mind it was like a 2.5-inch pinfish versus like a 3.5, 4-inch pinfish.
Yeah.
The bigger one was a little bit out of my range.
Yeah.
I could see that being really cool if you had a shallow water grouper spot.
Yeah.
Or
just too heavy.
You had an area where you had some big pinfish that you could throw at them, that they sat there. But that smaller bait, that smaller pinfish, worked really well. And there were several times where we knew where fish were staged up. And my cousin was throwing artificial soft plastics, our normal game, and could not get a fish to fire off. And as soon as I threw the pinfish in there, and the way I worked it was more of a steady retrieve, more of just a fish moving across the flat. And if you throw one, you'll know what I'm talking about. You can't really work it. It's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
But the tail on that bait throws off so much vibration, which is one of the reasons why I really love using live pinfish, that I think they got that dialed in pretty good to where the way I like to fish pinfish for redfish, I can sort of mimic that in that artificial bait. And
I'm gonna have to grab some of these for Wednesday.
It was really, really cool the way it worked.
I caught you called me, you're excited about it.
I caught like 3 or 4 redfish on fish we could not get to eat, and I ended up loading up on them. That tournament, which was actually, we're on the anniversary of it. I just posted it. That was that tournament that we took 3rd place in, the IFA tournament out of Ruskin, and I remember that
last year.
We didn't end up using the baits because we didn't fish that school, but
I remember you had to have them.
There was definitely a reason why we had to have them.
You know what? Talking all this artificial talk, brings me to, like, I remember when I used to be here more often in the store, and you listen to Pam and Hap and Keaton and all the people that work here, and outside of here, that's all they do is fish, and most of it is either land based or kayak based or wading, and so artificial is their go-to. I can tell you that I don't think there's a place. I would challenge you to find a place in this country that has more people that know their lures better than the staff here. We were in this debate last week. talking about different lures. But I'm telling you, you come in here and you want a cool lure, is they can take you through. And the nice thing about it is these guys stay in tune with everything that's happening in the industry. So if there's a new bait even being thought about being made, they're in tune with it and when it's going to be here. So like all these things that people always bring up, and I hear months and months and months after it's been released, I can tell you that the staff downstairs here has already had it, caught fish on it, and they're on
got
to
it
the
figured
next,
out.
Yeah, got it figured out. So
and selling it.
Yeah, and selling it. So if you got anything you want to check out, this is a staff you know and can trust. That's they eat, breathe, and sleep fish. So get in here and talk to them about it. We kind of hear about it secondhand at this point, like either from them or what's on the shelves. But
you know, and I get so stuck in my ways. I'll be honest with you, man. I don't even want to. There's a certain person that I know that is in the artificial lure engineering world that is a big part of a certain company's development in artificial lures. And I asked him recently, good friend of mine, I grew up with him, and I asked him, I said, you know, this selection that you guys have here with these colors and all these patterns and like all this crazy stuff, I said, is this to catch fish or is it to catch fishermen? He said it's about 70-30.
Yeah.
He said 70% catch fishermen.
Sure.
And I don't say that to stray anybody away from spending the time to pick out a lure and enjoying that process and, you know, this looks cool and trying to match the hatch and all that stuff. But the more you get involved with it, you'll find out that some of it is really to catch you and to build your confidence. If you're throwing a bait that looks like something that you think will catch a fish, you're going to be more productive. You know, there's been several times where I've handed people a bait, and I'm like, throw this. I'm like, oh, you got a pink color or you got a white or no, that's what I catch fish on. I promise you to catch fish. And until I put a pink lure on or a pink jig on that bait, you know, they're not going to feel confident they're going to catch a fish.
Right.
And so, you know, don't get sold into that whole game.
Sure. And don't spread yourself too thin either.
Right.
I think that's a mistake I see from a lot of people who want to catch fish on artificials is you end up having too many options, too many choices that you're leaving yourself to make. And what ends up happening is then you spread whatever limited confidence you can acquire across multiple baits, and instead of dialing in the fish behaviors, you're more relying on maybe a particular bait or color because it happened to be what you had tied on when the fish started eating. Instead of the fish started eating.
Right. The reason why the fish started eating.
For example, if I were to go to a redfish tournament, I would say that I could be in a very confident position to head out with 3 or 4 baits. And then you could up that number to 10 or 12, and my confidence probably wouldn't even go up, to be honest with you.
No, it's for me, it's all situational.
Yeah.
So, like, in fact, I just did a seminar with O'Brien's, and I think I mentioned it, but I brought in my tournament box. It's a Pelican case about this big, and it's got everything.
Gold glitters.
Yeah, everything that I bring on a tournament, it's in there.
What's up, Prieto?
And so it ain't much. Now, there's a lot going on in there, but the diversity is not that much. I've got a lot of the same thing because that's what I'm confident in.
Well stocked.
You know, well stocked of the stuff that I've got. But, you know, I've always got a top water on. Normally we'll have a gold spoon on. Normally I'll have something here lately with a pop and cork on it for some of these darker situations that we've been fishing. But that's about it, you know. I mean, there's not a lot going on there. Not all these tons of different hard plastics and soft baits and this and that. The question came up in a recent seminar that I did about I did an artificial seminar, and we talked about the water column. We talked about, you know, they were working fish from the bottom, working from the bottom, working to the middle, working to the top, and what baits do I use in that situation? And the assortment that I put out there, we had one guy that was a bass fisherman, and he's like, dude, what do you mean? I got, you know, a million of those for that and this and that. And I said, well, the difference, I said, did you, and the guy happened to be kind of like a pro-am bass guy. And I said, well, where do you travel to go fish? He's like, oh, I go over to the southeast. I said, that's why you need to have so much. I said, because you fish a ton of different areas. Every lake has got a little bit different. Some of them doesn't have frogs. Some of them's got lizards. And,
what's
you know,
the shorelines look like? What's
does it have shad? Does it have, you know, are they eating ducks? I mean,
it's a lot more
you can be a
than the
bass fisherman. You got a duck for a lure.
Yeah.
You know?
A rat.
Right, a rat, a snake. I mean, these guys go crazy with it. But don't compare yourself to that fishery.
Sure.
And when you walk into a place, a big box store like Bass Pro Shops, you know, you can get lost real quick, and you'll even notice that a lot of times the saltwater section is a lot smaller than the freshwater section. I think offshore fishing is really what, if it isn't, that's what's boosting it, not inshore stuff. You know, so
sure.
Get the baits for your area, zone in on that. Don't spend a ton of money. Learn how to work a lure. That was the other one. Is, man, pick a lure, take that lure for the day, and go use it.
Go fish it. Yeah,
go use it.
That'll make you a better fisherman for sure. Man, we're getting close here, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about time to go eat, man.
Yeah, no
and
doubt.
wear your sunscreen, man. I hope Kirk's watching, man. Golly,
dude, you're flaking everywhere.
I know, man. Leave some here.
Got a little bit of a burn, but yeah.
My hat blew off at about 10:30, and I fished them guys in the afternoon, man, and I got roasted.
We're gonna be doing some filming this week. Coming up later in the week, I think it's Wednesday. Should be exciting. Got a bunch of fishing to do over the weekend. Looks like we're going to have another windy weekend.
Yeah.
Starting Thursday.
Go figure.
Go figure. So just prepare for that. Lower water. Tides.
That's what I'm interested in.
Wind out of the north. Well, you're going to get it.
I had the same group. My cousin called me, and real special trip for me. I only get to fish with my cousin a few times. Actually, I didn't get to fish with him last year, but he ended up, him and a few of his buddies, Army veterans, that he met in basic and did his first couple tours in Afghanistan with, came over and fished with me Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
And Saturday
that's who I met on your boat.
That's it. Yeah. He came in a day early and worked with me on Friday.
That's cool.
That was some of his working off washing dishes.
Yeah,
washing
dishes.
So anyway, I took those guys fishing, and their whole plan was they really wanted to do some snapper and grouper, bring home some fish. And I said, listen, guys, Saturday going to be a little tough. I said, why don't we take the skiff and let's just stay inside the sandbar. Let's just not even plan on going outside the sandbar. And so we did that, and we had a great day. But I saw boats out there in that stuff, man. I saw like a 20-foot Key Largo on the outside out there running, and I kept my eye on him the whole time until he got. Yeah, man.
Oh.
So be careful, guys. Now I will say this: 2 hours after that, it laid down somewhat calm, and then 2 hours later, it was blowing. The wind switch that came out, out of the south. So just be careful with some of these storms, man. That bay can get really, really nasty.
Watch your tides too,
and it's going to get worse. Wind. It's going to get worse as we move into our winter here with these lower tides. For safety reasons, you're not going to be able to even get on the inside of the bars. So you're going to have to run on the outside in a bigger boat, and just be careful you don't get stuck in a place where you get in a hairy situation out there. So just watch that weather.
Yeah. No doubt. Before we take off, let's recap the YouTube. So with the folks here, between myself, Travis, Rick, and Jason, we partnered with Tampa Fishing Outfitters, our title sponsor. We're going to be giving away a fishing charter, a free fishing charter, and the only way you can enter that is to hop on over to YouTube and put in the search bar "Fitted to Fish" or Tampa Fishing Outfitters, and find that Fitted to Fish YouTube page. And what you're going to see on there is a bunch of tips and tricks and gear reviews. It's actually going to be a helpful page if you haven't found it yet. And I know that's where some of our stuff we've doing
got Wednesday, some content that we're going to
is going to be landing there. And I'm pretty excited about the schedule of videos we're doing.
Yeah.
But in doing that, just by subscribing to that page, you're entering yourself into the charter giveaway, okay? So right now, and don't quote me on the number, it's somewhere around 400 subscribers. When it reaches 700, which will probably be in 2 to 3 weeks, Joy, who manages Tampa Fishing Outfitters, she's going to select at random one of those subscribers, and they're going to win the fishing charter. All right. We already gave away a pair of Costa sunglasses through another contest like that through YouTube. So that's where your ongoing contests are going to be. The cool thing about that is anybody who was in there earlier for the Costa giveaway, even though they didn't win the Costas, they're still eligible for the fishing charter.
Right, because they're still a subscriber.
By subscribing into this,
unless you didn't get mad because you won the pair of or you didn't win the Costas and you left.
Yeah.
Well, hey,
But
Sorry.
yeah, so just by subscribing, you're entered into all the future YouTube giveaways with us because I know we have other charters we're going to be giving away.
Well, it's a good place to be.
Definitely
it's a
makes
good place
sense.
to subscribe.
So Liverpool, head on over there and subscribe. Prieto, head on over there, subscribe.
Prieto,
I'm not taking
come on,
Prieto,
dude.
though.
I'm not taking him, dude.
Yeah.
I'm charging him double.
Yeah, double. But that's a wrap, folks. We'll see you next Monday. Well, we got to go get some food in our bellies.
Oh, my
It's
gosh.
too late.
Get out of
We'll
here.
see you next Monday, same time, same place, 7 o'clock live. See ya.